My power-hungry boss denied my pre-approved vacation the day before it was set to start, so I exposed his disgusting past to the entire company and got him fired. My boss and I have never got along, but we were never sworn enemies until the day before my pre-approved holiday. He called me into his office to let me know that plans have changed and that I better show up for work tomorrow if I want to have a job. You see, this holiday was for my wife and I's dream vacation, a vacation during which we were set to celebrate her birthday. She cried when I broke the news to her, and that was when I decided on revenge. Nobody was going to break my wife's heart like this. The first few weeks passed, and my resentment toward my boss, Mr. Randall, grew. I contemplated how to get back at him constantly, and due to the fact that I despised him now, I watched him closer to see if he really was a power-hungry tyrant, and he was. I started paying more attention to how condescending he was to other workers, how he'd demand my colleagues to skip their 15 and do more work. He was a dictator ruling with an iron fist, micromanaging every detail and criticizing every decision that was made by any employee. Morale in the office kept plummeting, and even the most dedicated employees felt the strain. His disrespect for everyone beneath him was very clear, as one day, I even saw him go as far as literally spitting on the ground behind a janitor's back, then calling her over telling her she missed a spot. He was also incompetent, as most of the time that he ordered me to do something, we'd get into disputes because he genuinely was wrong. My wife's birthday also came and went, and on that day, the day we were supposed to be in the world's largest flower field, I was working overtime as per Randall's demand. When I came home, my wife and I had a lovely home-cooked meal I made for her, but it wasn't the same. Watching her go to bed that night in disappointment gave me the extra motivation needed to get my revenge. But you see, the need to get back at Randall grew even stronger, because one late afternoon as I was finishing up some system maintenance, I overheard a conversation between Randall and one of the executives, Mr. Thompson. They were in Randall's office and the door was open just slightly. I knew eavesdropping wasn't exactly ethical, but the tension in the office had driven me to seek out any information that might explain Randall's behavior. Look, Thompson, I can't stand that IT guy. John is always poking his nose where it doesn't belong. He thinks he knows everything. I felt a surge of anger, but forced myself to stay quiet and listen. Thompson's response was, John's good at what he does, Randall. He's been with the company for over a decade. The systems run smoothly because of him. Randall scoffed. Smoothly? Maybe so, but he's a pain in my butt. Every time I make a decision, he's there questioning it and acting like he knows better. I don't need a tech guy telling me how to run things. Thompson sighed. He's just trying to do his job. The IT department is crucial, and John's always been thorough. If he's questioning something, maybe it's worth considering. Randall's tone grew more aggressive. No, Thompson, you don't get it. He undermines my authority. He's too curious for his own good, always digging into things, always asking questions. I don't trust him. There was a brief silence before Thompson spoke again. What do you want to do about it then? I'll find a way. Everyone has skeletons in their closet. It's just a matter of time before I find his. I felt a chill run down my spine. Randall wasn't just a terrible manager. He was actively looking to get rid of me. I stepped away from the door, my mind racing. As I made my way back to my desk, I couldn't help but think about Randall's words. His dislike for me wasn't just about my work. It was personal. He saw me as a threat, and that made him dangerous. I was already planning on how to get my revenge on him, but this made me even more certain of what I had to do. I came home to my wife to tell her about what I heard, and she wasn't shocked. She was on the F. Randall bandwagon too. I told her I had to get to Randall before he got to me, and so I got to work. I decided to use my IT knowledge and upper-level company connections to expose him for the person he really was. I knew I needed to be careful. Randall was powerful, and if I made a wrong move, it would cost me my job. I spent the next few days on guard. My late-night sessions of sifting through files and emails took on a new urgency. If Randall was gunning for me, I needed to be one step ahead. My position in IT granted me access to a lot of information. I knew where to look and how to find what I needed without raising any suspicion. Over the next few days, I started digging into his history. I kept my interactions with Randall minimal and made sure to document everything carefully. I combed through everything that might give me a clue about who he really was. One thing about him that really stood out to everyone in the company was his behavior around the female employees. He was often crossing boundaries with inappropriate jokes and unsolicited compliments that left many feeling uncomfortable. He had a habit of lingering too long in their personal space. He made them visibly uneasy. It wasn't noticeable enough to be outright harassment, but it was unsettling. That night, I sat in my dimly lit home office. The glow of the computer screen burned my eyes from sitting there so long. It had been another long day at work, filled with the usual frustrations since Mr. Randall took over. My wife had long since gone to bed, and I could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background. I was determined to find something that could get Randall to resign. I had spent the past few hours digging through his digital footprint, but so far, I had found nothing I could use as a slam dunk on him. But then I noticed a small detail that I had overlooked the first time. A reference to an external audit from his previous job. It seemed irrelevant, but something about it nagged at me. The audit was mentioned in a single line within a broader document about employee transfers. It was dated a few months before Randall had joined our company originally. I made a note of the audit's reference number and decided to call it a night. As I shut down my computer, a sense of defeat washed over me. Maybe he was just a difficult person, and there was nothing more to it. I climbed into bed and tried to not disturb my wife. She spoke softly in her sleep. I tossed and turned burned up until the morning. The next morning I woke as the sun was just beginning to rise. As I laid there, I started to think more and more about Randall. The audit reference. Why had I dismissed it so quickly? There had to be more to it. I jumped out of bed and hurried to my office. My heart was pounding at this point. I booted up my computer and accessed the database again, and quickly found the reference number. I used my IT skills to bypass the standard access protocols and dive deeper into Randall's previous employer records. The audit report was buried deep within the company's archives, but I finally found it. As I read through the document, my eyes widened. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The audit had involved gaps in the financial records, specifically related to a chain of large, unexplained withdrawals. Randall's name was mentioned several times in connection with these discrepancies. It was clear that the auditors had suspected embezzlement, but there wasn't enough evidence to take legal action. Instead, the company had went with a quiet settlement and allowed Randall to resign. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. I needed more details, though. I dug further, comparing the dates and amounts from the audit report with Randall's email history. It took hours, but I eventually found a series of encrypted emails that had been sent to an external account. They were sent through several servers to hide where they originally came from, but I had enough expertise to trace them back. The email he had communications with had a surprising domain. It belonged to a fast food restaurant. I frowned, wondering why Randall would be communicating with someone at a fast food place. I dug deeper into the email exchanges. They were encrypted, but after a bit of effort, I managed to decode them. The emails were short and discussed various amounts of money and payment schedules. I decided to look up the email address and discovered it belonged to an employee named Marcus, who worked at the fast food restaurant. It made no sense. Why would Randall be sending money to this guy? As I looked into Marcus's background, I found that he was a low-level employee with no apparent connection to Randall or the corporate world. Something didn't add up. Why would a high-powered executive like Randall be dealing with a fast food worker? I decided to dig into Marcus's social media profiles and online presence. It took some time, but I eventually found a connection. Marcus was friends with a known substance dealer. This meant that Marcus was likely the middleman for Randall and Rico. I dug further and cross-referenced the dates and the amounts mentioned in the audit report. It became clear that Randall had been embezzling funds from the company to pay off his debt to Rico. The amounts matched the discrepancies found in the audit and confirmed my suspicions. I sat back, and my mind raced. This was far bigger than I had imagined, and he had brought his shady operation into our company. I knew I had to act quickly and carefully. I compiled all the evidence I had found, the audit report, the encrypted emails, and the financial records. My investigation into Randall's past didn't stop there. As I continued searching, I stumbled upon another sealed HR file from his previous job. It took some effort to access, but eventually I broke through the security protocols. What I found was shocking. Randall had been accused of indecent conduct with a female employee. The details were disturbing. The employee had filed a complaint, and there had been an internal investigation. The case was strong, but Randall had used his connections, and the company were trying to avoid a scandal. Based on the file, they decided to settle the matter quietly. He resigned under the reasoning of pursuing other opportunities. This was it. I had more than enough to bring him down. I wrote an anonymous email adding everything I found. I included the audit report as an attachment and referenced the encrypted emails, financial records, and the HR file from his previous job. The email was so factual and to the point, but it left no doubt about Randall's truth. I scheduled the email to be sent to every employee in the company. I included the board of directors and even key stakeholders. I set it to go out early the next morning and wanted to ensure it would be the first thing everyone saw when they started their day. That night, I barely slept. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I knew that what I was doing could have serious repercussions, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. Randall had to be stopped. The next morning, the office was in an uproar. Whispers and shocked expressions were everywhere. Employees gathered in small groups and were gossiping about the bombshell that was dropped on Mr. Randall. I made my way to the break room and tried to maintain a neutral expression, despite the satisfaction bubbling inside me. "Did you hear about Randall?" asked Susan, one of the marketing team members, as I poured myself a cup of coffee. I raised an eyebrow, acting shocked. "No, what happened?" She leaned in and lowered her voice, as if she was telling me a dark secret. "Someone sent an anonymous email to the entire company exposing Randall for embezzlement and inappropriate conduct with a female employee at his last job. Can you believe it?" I widened my eyes, doing my best to look shocked. "Wow, that's unbelievable. I knew he was tough, but I never imagined something like that." Paul, another colleague from finance, had joined us, shaking his head. "It's all true. HR and the legal team are already handling it. They escorted him out of the building this morning." "That fast?" I replied, trying to sound genuinely surprised. "I guess the evidence must be pretty damning." Susan nodded. Apparently the email included audit reports and emails that proved he was stealing money from the company to pay off some substance dealer. I took a sip of my coffee. "It's definitely a lot to take in. I just hope the company can recover from this." "Me too." too, Paul said. I mean, maybe this will be a turning point for us. The board announced an internal investigation to ensure that nothing like this could happen again. I had saved my job and secured my vacation. I was on a high, and I felt victorious. And now, with Randall gone and a new boss in, I was able to get my dream holiday approved. It took a few months for the next slot to be available, but when it was, my wife and I finally boarded the plane to Dubai. I couldn't shake the feeling of satisfaction. My wife squeezed my hand, and her eyes were sparkling with excitement. It was a look I hadn't seen in a long time. It was a mixture of relief and happiness. This trip meant everything to us, and now it was finally happening. The resort was even more beautiful than we had imagined, and the Miracle Garden made my wife cry with how gorgeous it was. Every moment felt like a dream, a well-deserved break from the chaos of the past few months.